Hello, everyone. Very good morning. If that's not too much to ask, can I get a good morning back? Good morning. Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. First things first, thank you very much for setting some time apart amidst your busy schedule and joining us for this session. Means a lot. I'll try and do my best to keep this session as short as possible, giving you just the right things and no sales pitches, okay? But however, that's not a promise. If I go a bit salesy, please bear with me, okay? But I'll try and strike the right balance. A quick introduction about myself, and then the topic that I have today for today is, my name is Vivin Satyan, and I have been working with this company called ManageEngine. Any of you heard of this company called ManageEngine before? Okay, good. ManageEngine is actually a division of a broader company called Zoho Corporation. So Zoho focuses on developing business applications like your CRM, mail client, and all that. So we have close to 50 products there, completely SaaS. And ManageEngine focuses on developing applications for enterprise IT. So these are the two divisions, and I'm here to represent ManageEngine, talking about IAM and Identity and Access Management and SIEM. So these two are the verticals that I represent, right? And what I do is I work as a senior technology consultant, and I've been with ManageEngine for more than 12 years now. I do two things. Number one is I take part in seminars, conferences, workshops, and I talk to the IT fraternity. It's always been a learning experience. And the second thing that I do is I also implement IAM and SIM solutions in small, medium, and large enterprises. And I also do a bit of risk assessment and health checks for enterprises, okay? With that little bit of experience in hand, I thought I'll put together a deck that talks about the importance of identity-centric security. And I have my own arguments why we should focus on identity security, especially in 2024. All right. Before that, I would like to know how many of you know about this specific term called melatonin. A show of hands, please. Okay, good. For the benefit of the larger audience, melatonin is a natural hormone that your brain secretes, especially the pineal gland part of your brain. So when you sleep in complete darkness, that's when your retina signals your brain saying, this guy is out, so let's start some rejuvenation process, and the brain starts secreting melatonin. Now, why am I talking about a sleep hormone in a tech talk, okay? I told you that I've been doing tech talks for 12 years, and I've realized melatonin not just secretes during darkness, it also gets secreted 30 minutes into a tech session, okay? So let's try and fight melatonin for the next 45 minutes. So that's a request. Not 45 minutes, I'll try to complete this within 40. So with that said, I'm here to talk about identity security. And when you talk about identities, I'll have to first start with what are the different types of identities that we have in any digital infrastructure, okay? There you go. So we have device. So basically, the definition of identity is anything that I can use to identify an object in my digital infrastructure can be categorized as an identity, all right? So I have device. I have network, that's also an identity. So you have routers, switches with, you can probably identify a router with its name, identify probably a switch with its naming convention. And then we have applications. Applications have PIDs using which we identify applications inside a digital network. And then we have users. Users obviously have credentials, right? So all these are the common types of identities that we have in any digital infrastructure. All right. Now, out of these four identities, my focus will be on, any guesses? Users, okay? Why users? I have my justification for that. Which one do you think is more vulnerable? Application, network, device, or the user? I'll prove it to you. How many of you still use password at 123? Please don't raise your hands. Okay? So we can talk about high security stuff, but at the end of the day, we are creatures of habit. So it makes sense to first start with user identities and then build your identity security process. So I'm here to talk about securing user identities, right? Now, disclaimer, I'm not here to talk about this person sitting with a hood on, okay? There are two variables at play at any given situation, controllable variables and uncontrollable variables. This is more of an uncontrollable variable according to me, okay? So what I'm here to talk about is not about securing my user identities from this guy, but I'm here to talk about this, which is a controllable variable, and what you see here is an admin error, okay? So someone with a local admin right clicks on something or downloads something, and that opens up a Pandora's box. And we have seen this, and this is something that we can control, okay? And the next thing is definitely something that we can control, okay? Any of you see something wrong with the picture? Okay, all it takes is one user to open the wrong door, okay? That's the whole idea. So we are going to be talking about variables that we can control. That's, I think, a practical objective that I set. Now, user education works, but to a certain extent. You tell people not to click something, not to download something, no password at 1, 2, 3. We are going to follow some best practices. It works, okay? But most of the user education programs, at least the ones that I've been a part of, are not contextual, okay? Now, I use this to sum it up. For example, my manager appreciates me for not opening a phishing email that he sent to me. I, on the other hand, have close to 700 emails in my inbox. Forget about the phishing email. I've not opened work emails yet, okay? So the context is something that is missing from most of the user education programs. So user education goes only to a certain extent. That's important, but it only contributes to a very small percentage when it comes to securing identities. So how do we go about the whole process, or where do we begin the whole thing? So user education works, but that's a small chunk. What do we do, okay? So let me ask you this question. How many of you use Active Directory here? Okay, good. I know that's a dumb question. So Active Directory is kind of omnipresent because most of the organizations use Active Directory. And the trend that I have personally seen is, after the pandemic, if you can call it after the pandemic. So I have seen a lot of organizations take the hybrid route. So they are not just on-prem, they are not completely on the cloud, but they are hybrid, okay? I'd like to understand the audience here. How many of you have hybrid Active Directory? Okay, good. How many of you are 100% cloud? No on-prem footprint at all? Okay, we have a few. But majority, as I understand, are operating hybrid. So what we are going to do here is we are going to start the whole process of securing user identities from Active Directory, okay? So, and I'm going to give you some actionable items that you can put to use in your infrastructure irrespective of the applications which you're already using for IAM and SIEM. That's the whole idea, okay? I don't want you to be vendor bound, okay? So you can be using any application. Please see whether the action items that we discussed today in this session can be put to use in your application. That's the whole idea. All right. I always start this exercise with a small demo, okay? And that demo is we are going to try and hack Active Directory. Now that most of you said that you have hybrid, what that means is you have on-prem and you have Azure, and these two things talk to each other. Yes or no? Yes, good. So we'll first try and compromise Active Directory, understand the possible vulnerabilities, and then talk about how do you prevent all these from happening, okay? A quick disclaimer, do not try this at home or office. If you try this, forget the fact that you listen to this session, okay? This is my 2012 R2 server. Please do not laugh at me. Any of you still use 2012 R2? No? This is, by the way, EOL according to Microsoft, but I still continue to use it, okay? Let's do a quick Active Directory recap here, okay? Oops, sorry. Kick me out. All right, this is my Active Directory setup. I roughly have a few hundred accounts. This is just my lab, so I do all sorts of things here. This is not a proper setup, but the technology is the same. So I'm going to ask you a quick question here. Active Directory has a database which has all your user information. So if you have 500 employees, 5,000 employees, all the user information is stored in the Active Directory database. And can some of you help me with the name of the Active Directory database file? It starts with N. I'll give you a clue. What's that? I'm hearing some answers, but if you can be loud. What's the name of the Active Directory file? ntds.dit. Thank you. So if you actually open up a server that has Active Directory, and if you go to C drive, Windows folder, NTDS folder, you have this file called ntds.dit. Okay? This is actually your Active Directory database. Okay? What does this file have? Well, all your user information. If you have 500 employee accounts in AD or 5,000 accounts, you have the information about all those users here. But Microsoft has done a good job in separating the lock from the key. Okay? So if you need to unlock this file, you need the key, and the key is present in this folder. Again, in the same server. If you go to C drive, Windows folder, system32 config, you have the system file here. Now for convenience, let's call this the key file. Okay? If you need to take down any Active Directory instance, you need these two files, which is the dit file and the system file. Okay? And let's try to do this. Okay? I'm going to do a right click, copy, and I'm going to paste. How many of you think that I'll be able to successfully copy a live database just by copy paste? No. Simple logic, you'll not be able to copy a file that is already open and paste it somewhere. Okay? And we are trying to copy a database which has an EFS on it, which is an operating system level encryption. So I'll not be able to just copy paste this file and take it with me. Okay? So method 1 is a failure. Method 2, I can probably install a ripper software on this box, okay, and then try to rip the files that I want, which is the Active Directory database and the key file. But if I do that, I will be the dumbest person working in IT. Why? Because the minute you install something on the domain controller, what happens? The alarm goes off, okay? And there's an audit trail, there's an event. It clearly tells who, what, when, and where, okay? So we are trying to do something that goes under the radar, okay? Right here, okay? And I have already launched the command prompt with the privilege of what, if you can read it for me at the very top. What's the username that you're seeing here? Administrator, okay? Now don't ask me, I'm a regular technician and I've elevated myself to the level of the administrator. Don't ask me how, because you have 17-minute YouTube videos teaching you how to do this. So don't ask me how to do this. It's already available there. It's not that hard as well. So assuming that you've already elevated yourself to that of an administrator, you are a regular user or you are a technician, you have now elevated your privilege, and you're going to use a simple tool like command prompt. Okay? So using command prompt, if you are going to invoke any third-party command sets, again, the alarm is off, so we'll not be able to do that successfully. So what you can do is, one thing that you can do for sure is see whether there are built-in utilities that you can use and that are not audited frequently so that we don't get caught, okay? And one such utility, built-in utility given to us by Microsoft that you can use with the command prompt is VSS admin. Any of you used VSS admin before? Okay, some of you have, good. So VSS admin lets you do a lot of things, but I'm interested, for this demo, I'm interested in the second command that you see here. If you can read that out loud for me, what does this command say? Create shadow, okay? Now create shadow, as the name indicates, it's going to help you create a shadow of something, okay? Which means it's going to help you take a copy of something. Now what are we trying to copy here? 2 files, right? And both the files are inside which directory? Is it C or D or E? C, okay? So I am going to use VSS admin and copy the entire C drive and then drill down and copy the 2 files that I want. That's step number 1. Okay, so VSS admin create shadow for the entire C drive because both my target files are inside this drive, okay? So I have now successfully created a shadow of the entire C drive. I have 2 points here. I have something called shadow copy ID, and I also have something called shadow copy volume name, okay? This is important, I'll tell you why. So copy I'm now actually going to my first target. And what's the first target file? If you remember, ntds.dit, okay? That's the Active Directory file, target number 1 that I'm trying to copy. But if I do the commands copy and type C:, this would become an invalid reference. My computer will be confused. Why? Because we are not working with the actual C drive, but we are working with the shadow copy of C drive, okay? We already have the copy. We are working with that, okay? So instead of typing in C:, I'll have to replace this with the shadow copy volume name of C:. Where do I go for that? Just look above, and you have shadow copy volume name right here. So this is how your C drive is represented. So I do right-click, mark, and I'm copying the shadow copy volume name. This is how C drive looks like. So this is my entire C drive, not just C:, okay? Let's now dive deeper. So I'm going to the Windows folder, and I'm going to the NTDS folder. And inside the NTDS folder, the file that I'm looking for is ntds.dit. So I have now fixed my target. The next question is, where do I want to paste this file? Okay. Now tell me, if you were doing this exercise in your office, but please don't do that, but in case you're doing it, where would you paste the Active Directory database? Option 1, you would paste it on the same box, or option 2, you would paste it on a UNC path only which you have access to. Which one seems like a logical option? UNC, so a network path only which you have access to, right? But for the sake of this demonstration, and just because I don't have multiple monitors, I'm going to paste it on the local machine itself. So C, sorry, I'll do this again, C:, users, Vivin, and then desktop, okay? Now, if the command is right, I hope it's right, fat fingers, I'm sorry. When I hit enter, you will see the database file getting pasted somewhere here, okay? Just to make sure the desktop is clean, so let's do this. It says one file copied, and I have the, can you see the database file here? So now I have a copy of your Active Directory database, which has user information, and all I need to do is just repeat the same step to copy the system file, which is the key file to open the Active Directory database, okay? A quick check. Am I making sense to you so far? Okay, we're good. So just because we are pressed for time, I'm not going to show you how to copy the second file, but you know how to do this. All you have to do is just change the path, change the location and execute the same command. You'll have these two files. That's step number 1 of the attack that we are trying to perform, okay, right here. Step number 1 is copy the NTDS and the system file. What is step number 2? So your Active Directory database file has password hashes, okay? So let's say your password is RSA at 123 or RSA conf at 123. The hashed version of the passwords will be stored in the ntds.dit file, okay? And we'll have to extract the hashes from the Active Directory database. That's step number 2. And I'm skipping that part, but I'll show you how the hashes looks like, okay? These are not actual passwords, but these are hashed version of the passwords, okay? Now, please help me with this. What is the reverse process of encryption called? Decryption, plain, simple, okay? But what is the reverse process of hashing called? Yeah, so you'll have to crack the hashes, right? So you have hashes right here, and you cannot reverse them, so you'll have to actually crack the hashes to reveal the passwords, okay? So these are hashes, so you do a Control A, Control C, okay? And open up something like this. What is this, if you can read it out for me, the one that I've highlighted? Free password hash cracker. And why am I working with a free version? Because I live on a budget and I'm not a hacker by any means. So I'm going to be using a free password hash cracker. So I paste all the hashes. I confirm that I'm not a robot. Let's see if the internet works. Crack hashes, Let's give it a few seconds. So I have the hash, the algorithm that was used for hashing. In this case, it was SHA-1, and I have some lame passwords here, okay? So the idea here is, and by the way, this is, if at all you're interested in knowing how hashing works and what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, this is a very good free resource, crackstation.net, just letting you know. So the point that I'm trying to drive is we were able to successfully get hold of the passwords of, let's say, 10 or 15 user accounts in Active Directory, okay? And with all these passwords, imagine a user walking into your organization the next day, not just with one credential, but now with more than one credential, okay? The impact that these events have in the organization is something that we cannot overlook, okay? No matter what size of an organization we are. And we'll also have taken into consideration that we are talking about three important components in any digital infrastructure. One is your on-premise box, and the other one is your Azure vertical, and the other one is your cloud applications. Now, these three verticals talk to each other, okay? The communication is bidirectional. And the point here is, if I compromise on-premise Active Directory day one, it's just a matter of time that the attack surface moves from on-prem to Azure and then to your cloud verticals. So it is very important when you talk about securing digital identities, we'll have to first start with Active Directory, good. But we'll also have to focus on on-premise security, because I go to health checks, I see that administrators don't pay enough attention to on-premise Active Directory security as much as they do for the Azure verticals, okay? So on-premise has legacy controls. It does not have a proper GUI to track and all that. And some of the settings are there for ages, untouched, okay? And one example, I can prove it to you. When was the last time you modified a GPO that was connected to the domain? Way back in 2017 or 2018. Or some of you might have modified a GPU yesterday. I'm not saying all of you do this, but most of the organizations that go to have legacy controls when it comes to on-premise Active Directory. And when one gets hit, it's just a matter of time that the attack surface moves to the other verticals, okay? All right. Now that our mission is to secure user identities, we'll have to first understand the new network perimeter. Let's call it before and after pandemic. Okay? I mean, it might not be appropriate, but for the sake of the conversation. Now, when you talk about the traditional IT infrastructure, most of it was on-prem. Okay? When things were on-prem, securing it was much more controllable, or it was much more manageable. In the sense, verifying and verification and authorization was much more easier because you had everything in control. Okay? Location used to be a trust factor. If the location is equal to X, then this IP can be trusted. Okay? If location is equal to Y, then this can be trusted. That was the thought process. And if external users needed access to the resources within your infrastructure, you had VPN and network access control. That's all we needed. Okay? Some firewall controls, DMZ, all that is all we wanted, or all that we need to manage a traditional infrastructure. But now, if you take a look at cloud adoption in the equation, your data is getting placed increasingly outside the traditional corporate network. So location is not a trust factor anymore, okay? Because people can access your enterprise application not just from within your office, but they can be at RSA, they can connect to VPN and still access your corporate resources, okay? So people are placing corporate data outside the traditional network, number one. Point number two, access is from left, right, and center, okay? It's not defined to just one location anymore. As a result of which, we have this problem called soft boundaries. So what soft boundaries means is you cannot define a safe location for access anymore. So if someone is accessing your corporate data from your office network, you cannot take that for a safe access, okay? So you'll still have to vet the access and then allow users access to your resources. So I'm talking about multiple stages of vetting before you actually allow users access to something, okay? hybrid AD has a crucial role to play. As I mentioned earlier, after the pandemic, I see a lot of organizations going the hybrid route than the traditional on-premise route for two reasons. Best of both worlds. With on-prem, you get regulatory compliance right here. Regulatory compliance, performance, and data gravity. Well, performance is debatable, but to a certain extent, yes. Okay? But with cloud in the equation, it gave you benefits like speed. It allows you to scale, and maintenance is kind of super easy. Okay? So with these two benefits put together, hybrid AD is being adopted by a lot of organizations. All right. But the problem when you bring cloud in the equation is lack of transparency, okay, or lack of visibility. With on-prem, things were much more manageable. You had LDAP taking care of communication. You had few legacy protocols taking care of authentication, authorization. Everything was good. Okay? But with cloud in the picture, we do not have a clear understanding of what is going on, or let's say, am I using a vulnerable version of a protocol, or are the applications compatible with my systems? So there are a lot of questions that we have, as a result of which, if you take a look at the block in the bottom, we started off with on-prem, and then we moved to hybrid. We realized bringing cloud into the equation gave us something called lack of transparency. So in order to overcome the lack of transparency problem, we started adopting more applications. Not just Microsoft, but also non-Microsoft third-party vendors. A lot of onboarding of those. Okay? As a result of which, the challenge that now we're trying to fix or address is fragmented identities. Now, what do I mean by fragmented identity? Okay? For one physical user called Vivint, you have multiple digital identities. One in on-prem, one in Azure, one in your cloud apps. Okay? And all these identities are fragmented, are not managed under one umbrella most of the time. Of course, you have SSO, of course, you have MFA, but we still have gaps. Okay? Now, administrators now have this problem, or now have this challenge of defining access policies that are contextual. What do I mean by contextual? You cannot look just at location and then give access to your resource. You'll have to bring in multiple risk parameters. You'll have to look at location, you'll have to look at IP, you'll have to look at device, and you'll have to compute an overall risk score for that user before you allow that user access to a certain resource in the infrastructure. Am I making sense so far? Okay, so this is exactly what we are trying to achieve. Okay, this is the core objective of my session. Okay. But how do we translate philosophies to action items? What is the solution? We need to really manage and secure fragmented identities, but what exactly do we do, or what action items do we incorporate, right? Implement zero trust, very easy, easier said than done. Let me ask you this, a very important question. I ask this in all my talks, okay? And I get the same answer. Let's see. How many of you have successfully implemented zero trust in your organization? Show of hands, please. 1, 2, and 3. This is the exact ratio that I get, okay? Absolutely. It's a journey. Zero trust. Yeah, but are we in the journey? Yes, some of us are, but are we sure of what do we do, or what steps do we take to actually complete the journey, or let's say get halfway? Well, the answer is debatable, okay? The problem is, it's not the concept as such. The marketing spin around zero trust is so much so that if you ask 5 people the definition of zero trust, they'll give you 6 definitions, okay? So that's how the spin is. And now that most of you did not raise your hand, it would make, this gentleman sad. Why? Because he came up with this concept called zero trust in the year 2010, and his name is John Kindervag. And I know Kindervag is somewhere around here in RSA. I hope he's not in this room. So this gentleman came up with this concept. The theories are strong. It's just that the philosophies or the marketing spin is kind of complex, that administrators do not even want to attempt to take the zero trust route, okay? So as this gentleman rightly pointed, it's a journey. It's a sequence of steps that you'll have to take in order to reach some sort of maturity when it comes to ZT. But if things are not broken, why try and fix it, is what I get as the answer when I ask people, are you in the zero trust journey? Okay? We are trying our best to secure, but we don't give it a name. We don't call it zero trust. We call it something else, but that works. Okay? I have 5 pointers here, and for the next 20 minutes, I will be quickly discussing these 5 pointers. Okay? The reason why I brought these 5 pointers is two. Number one, these 5 pointers are really important for securing user identities. Number two, we as vendors do this. Okay? And I know for a fact if you talk to any IAM vendor out there in the booth, they'll tell you they also do this. Okay? I'm not claiming that we are the only vendors who do this, but we've been doing this for the last 15 years, working on your feedback, and we are also working closely with analysts. We are seeing how the market is going and what's the need of the market, and we are doing our best one step at a time to bring in core features that are important for administrators to better manage and secure user identities, right? And if at all you are interested in knowing more, I'll not be able to show you a demo here. That's not the purpose of the session. I'm here to give you just action items to implement these 5 pointers, okay? Now, please see whether you can put to use the action items that I'm about to discuss in your IAM or SIEM solution. You need not be using one from ManageEngine, okay? That's the whole idea. Number one, it becomes of core importance that we focus on risk assessment. Okay? How many of you have the habit of performing risk assessment for your Active Directory infrastructure at least once in 6 months? Okay, good. My request to you is if you are managing your AD, be it on-prem or hybrid or cloud, please perform an automated risk assessment at least once in every 180 days, okay? And when I say automated, yes, it should be automated. It should look at the right parameters. That's point number one, and I'm going to discuss, and I'll actually expand more on that as we talk about the other pointers. Point number two, in order to complement your risk assessment process, you also have to do access certification campaigns, okay? Let me explain what that is, okay? You have users and you have groups. You give them certain rights. You assign them to certain groups. You give them roles. You give them licenses. But the point is, it's not always in assigning. Are you actually validating the privileges that they hold on? And are you able to come to a decision, this user can hold on to the privileges forever? This user's project is over. Now I'm going to take back those privileges, because else it becomes a bloated account, okay? So this is something that you'll have to do periodically, and that is why I call it as access certification campaign and not an exercise, okay? Campaign is something that you do periodically, okay? So you will have to verify your user's entitlements and then decide whether or not the user should hold on to those privileges forever, or are you going to revoke and then approve, okay? So you have a clean and lean user account system. Number three, any IAM solution or any SIEM solution for that matter cannot operate in silos, or it should not be operating in silos. I'll give you an example here. Almost all of you have an IT service management tool in your office, yes or no? Yes, and whenever you have a new hire or whenever a user is exiting or leaving your company, there is an onboarding and an offboarding process, and that gets initiated more often than not by your HR. And that lands to your technician and then to your IT team, okay? So that's the flow. So your HR uses a tool, your helpless technicians use a tool, your IT administrators use another console altogether. These three links should be talking to each other, okay? Whenever you're talking about managing users or managing identities, business application handshake is a very crucial factor, and I'll be expanding more on that aspect as well. Your IAM solution cannot operate in silos, okay? If there is a ticket for user creation that gets created in your IT service management tool, that ticket should automatically be pushed to your IAM tool, and after the functions are over, the closure of the ticket should be sent back to your IT service management tool. We are talking about end-to-end communication, right? Fourth point, implementing RBAC, which is role-based access control. I'm not talking about implementing RBAC for your administrators. Don't get me wrong. Administrators have the keys to your kingdom, okay? And you have vetted them carefully and given them access. Understood. But for regular users to perform actions in Active Directory or let's say Azure, why should you give them server access or admin portal access? Why not give them a bridge or let's say an application portal using which they are assigned a role and the role will only hold valid when the users are in the application. Their Active Directory permissions or their Azure license are not going to be altered for this. So we are talking about a non-intrusive delegation model. Why is that needed? Because it is not always the admin accounts that get compromised. It is the bloated account that is not paid enough attention that gets hit and compromised whenever I perform a scan in order to check for Active Directory health, okay? So it becomes very important for us to understand that your regular users should only have the rights that they are supposed to have and not bloated access, okay? And RBAC can help you do that. The last point, how many of you still use passwords for authentication? I mean, I do. Good. Some of you do, some of you are passwordless, and we know for a fact that Microsoft is pushing heavily for us to go passwordless, okay? But for some business functions, we still need passwords, okay? And what I believe is passwords are here to stay at least for the next 5 years, easy, okay? We are not going to be completely do away with passwords. They are going to be here. So when you talk about strengthening the authentication procedure, please make sure that you include password policies too, because we are still using passwords for legacy reasons, right? So there are 2 layers of authentication that I want you to focus on when you talk about securing user identities. One is ensuring no password at 1, 2, 3, which is users are not going to use that anymore. And you cannot do that by principle. You will have to take that principle and give it to them in a much more convenient manner so that they know that they are not supposed to be using easily compromised passwords. And the second is we'll have to deploy MFA. And when I say MFA, MFA should be adaptive MFA. Now, what do I mean by adaptive is it should look at various risk parameters and then allow a user or disallow a user and decide also the challenge mechanism, okay? So if I'm a regular user, I'm trying to log into my laptop from my office, the risk score might be 20 or 30. But if I'm a user trying to log into my corporate network from a free Wi-Fi in California, my office is in India. So if I'm doing something like this, the risk score is not going to be 20. The risk score would be much higher, yes or no? Which means when the risk score increases, I cannot depend on basic authentication MFA. I'll have to step up my game and challenge my users based on the context and based on the risk, okay? So that's exactly what I say when I talk about strengthening the 2 layers of authentication. And very important, you cannot have multiple policies and enforce them on your users because it'll be much more difficult for you to manage as administrators. So you'll have to one policy that actually covers these 2 layers. And it should be based on their job function and not one size fits all, because a regular user can have let's say a decent password policy, but a privileged user should definitely have a strong password policy, yes or no? So based on the function, you should be able, or based on the context, you should be able to define the challenge mechanism or define the risk parameters and then allow or disallow access. Let's get started one by one. And I'm going to talk about all these pointers from Manage Engine standpoint here. Let me tell you what we look at when I say understanding risk, okay? When you talk about common threats to Active Directory, you have these 6 pointers that we'll have to take into consideration. Number 1, default security settings. This is something that I see very frequently. When I actually visit for health checks or risk assessment, the one thing that I do is I look at GPOs, I study GPOs, and I look at orphan GPOs, in the sense GPOs that have not been linked to anything but have some high privilege settings enabled. Okay, those are risky. So we'll have to look at all these when you perform a risk assessment for your Active Directory infrastructure. Okay? I'm not going to be talking about all these points, but this is for your reference. Okay? And how should an Active Directory risk assessment process work? Or what is the objective that we are trying to achieve here? Number one, we are trying to gain critical insight on the overall health of your Active Directory infrastructure. We look at three things here. Number one, the performance. Number two, legacy configurations. Number three, event data. So we look at these three and then give you insights. The second point is, after gathering data from your Active Directory infrastructure, it could be a one-domain infrastructure or a multiple tree infrastructure, it doesn't matter. We gather data, and after we gather data, we apply rules and filters, and then we give it to you in the form of easily understandable risk scores. Okay? The example below will be able to better explain the points that I'm talking about. For example, admin users with password never expire flag set. Do you think it's a really good idea? Yes, it's a convenience. It is a convenience, okay? And if you actually go through Active Directory from a risk assessment standpoint, you will find all user accounts clean and neat, okay? But if you take a look at the admin accounts, the same flags that were prohibited for your users will be enabled for your admins. And one such flag is the password never expires flag, okay? Admins do not want to rotate their passwords, okay? I'm not talking about all, but some. So these are risky flags that I'm talking about that we'll have to keep in mind when you talk about Active Directory risk assessment. And I want you to look at the second point here. So how do you actually categorize risk? So you should take a look at three parameters. What is the likelihood of the event happening? And if the event happens, what is the impact? And after the impact, you'll have to measure the severity, 4 categories of severity. Critical, high, medium, and what is the last one? Low, okay? So these are the 4 levels of severity that we have to categorize. And if you are performing risk assessment, there are 3 risk models that I want you to refer in order to categorize risk, okay? If at all you're not using a tool, you're doing this manually. The first risk model is NIST, the second one is OWASP, and the third one is DREAD. These 3 are the trusted risk models for performing Active Directory risk assessment, right? And a quick formula for you to compute the overall risk score is likelihood. Likelihood has a score. The score is from 0 to 10. And likelihood into impact, okay? So this is the score that we'll have to compute and understand the overall functioning or overall health of our Active Directory infrastructure. And we, from a vendor standpoint, look into all these parameters, and then we give you the overall risk score as you see here, okay? Now, we have the risk score on one hand. What next? You'll have to categorize them, okay? Risk categorization is important, and that's exactly what we do, okay? You have categorized, but how do I actually mitigate them, or how do I overcome them? Now, I cannot, from a vendor standpoint, give you recommendations saying, well, you have inactive users, and some of those inactive users are administrators. Now go ahead and disable the users. That would be a logical recommendation, but is that going by the playbook that's already available in the market? That's the question, okay? So we don't give recommendations by ourselves. We incorporate playbooks from MITRE, from ANSI, and then we tell you what to do when you have a risky situation in place. Let's say you have a GPO that is linked to your domain and that has not been touched for years together, and what should you do now, okay? Should you actually, disable the GPO, unlink it, delete it? All these recommendations are in the MITRE playbook. We actually incorporate that and then give you recommendations, okay? That's for risk mitigation. And the second point here is access certification, okay? And let me keep it real simple here. Do you have the habit of reviewing your user privileges frequently? Some of you do. Can I see some show of hands, just to understand the audience? Okay, good. So this access certification takes into consideration 2 objects, okay? Users and groups. So you'll have to review the entitlements of users and also groups. I'll tell you why groups, okay? All of us know about this group called domain admins, right? In Active Directory, okay. And there's also this concept called nested groups. Now, what do I mean by nested groups is, I am a domain admin in the sense I am a direct member of the domain admins group, okay? And you have a person A who's not part of the domain admins directly, but if domain admin is linked to a group X, and I add this user to group X, now tell me, is this person A also a domain admin? Yes, because you have now nested a high privilege group to a low privilege group, and you are now adding this user to the low privilege group, which is nested, which elevates the user's right in Active Directory. So it's very important to look at user entitlements and group entitlements as well, okay, when you perform access certification. And what should you be doing? So you can schedule an access certification campaign, select the users and groups that you'd like to vet, and you can be the certifier, or it could be your team leads, your team managers, it could be, let's say, domain administrators. They can review the entitlements of the user, and they can either approve or deny. Approving is letting the user continue enjoy the privileges, okay? It could be the Office 365 roles that you mapped, or you can revoke and then continue with the process, okay? And we also maintain an audit report of what was allowed and what was revoked and by whom, okay? So this is a campaign, which means you can run this weekly, you can run this monthly, however you want, okay? But this is important. So the 2 pointers, risk assessment and access certification, are very, very important. I'm quickly going to jump to a few other things here before we close the session. I just have 5 minutes with you, okay? And I'm going to tell you how we secure 2 layers of authentication here. Number 1 is strengthening your existing passwords, okay? And number 2 is MFA. Please allow me to jump to my UI, in the sense my product's UI, to explain the concepts a lot better. And what we do here from an IAM standpoint is we actually cover these 2 in one policy. So you as an administrator can define a password policy that takes care of, that removes weak password from your digital infrastructure, and at the same time, it also takes into contextual MFA procedures. I'll show you how we do this, okay? And this is one module that we have as a part of our IAM suite. This is not the entire suite, this is just one module here. And the name of the module is AD Self-Service. Okay, and how many of you have heard about this site? Have I been pawned? All of you know what this site does, right? So this is a repository of blacklisted passwords. For example, if my user is going to set password at 123, okay, and let's see whether the password at 123 has been compromised before. Good news, no pawnage found, okay? So that's not the case. If you take a closer look, I'm not actually using with Have I Been Pawned, I'm using with another site that looks like Have I Been Pawned. So you cannot allow your users to directly go to a site, ask them to key in the password that they're about to set, and check whether it's compromised, and then go ahead with the password setting process. No, that's not going to work, okay? So what you have to do here is, whenever your end users are going to actually self-service their passwords, okay? Let's say they're going to set a new password, you have to integrate your self-service platform, which is an IAM process, with something called as, with a blacklisted password repository, something like Have I Been Pawned. So when your end users are going to set a compromised password, they will not be allowed to set that, okay? Let me introduce you to the policy here, and I'll show you how this works. So I told you that we have one policy covering your passwords and also your MFA needs. Can you read out the 4 operations that you see in black in the middle of the page? One is reset password. What are the other 3? Unlock account, self-update, and change passwords. So you can roll out this application and allow your users to perform these 4 operations. Why? Okay, all of you use LinkedIn here, yes? If you forget your LinkedIn's password, do you do self-service or do you call the LinkedIn's help desk to change the password? Sorry, the argument was dumb, okay? But we self-service our own passwords. But let me tell you this, okay? If you forget your Windows machine's password, right? Do we have, okay, let me show you something, okay? Do we have an option to reset our own password or unlock our own account? The answer is more often than not, it's no, because we don't have a way to self-service passwords. Immediately what we do is we log a help desk ticket, we call the help desk, and every help desk ticket that you raise for password reset has a business cost associated with it, okay? With the self-service portal, what we are trying to do is if your Windows users or Mac users forget their domain username or password, we give them the option to reset password or unlock the account from the UI itself, okay? So all the user has to do is just click on this link, launch the self-service portal, and the policy gets activated. I'll show you how the policy works, okay? So the way how the policy works is this covers two things. So this takes care of basic password enforcer. Here you have all the common characteristics here, how a password should be, uppercase, lowercase, complexities, and all that. On top of that, what we do is we integrate this self-service portal with Have I Been Pawned. So when your end users are going to self-service, it checks with the blacklisted password repository. If there's a match, your users will not be able to set those passwords. And you can define the risk parameters as well. The second, the same policy also takes care of MFA, okay? So we support more than 20 different MFA procedures that you can place in any place that you want. So let me quickly show you. Not just for logging in, you can use MFA for reset and unlock operation, MFA for endpoint logins, and also MFA for applications. So a quick recap of the things that we discussed so far. Doing risk assessment and the procedures that you need to follow and the threat models that you need to imbibe. And the second one is performing access certification campaigns on a regular basis. Number three, have one policy in place to actually secure the authentication process, removing blacklisted passwords from the infrastructure. If we do all this, I'm pretty sure that we will be in a better shape than we are right now. And this deck has a lot more information for you to consume, and this will be reaching you probably in a week's time. If at all you need anything, please stop by the booth. The name of the company, once again, is ManageEngine. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, that's my LinkedIn handle. Thank you very much for your time and patience. All of you have a wonderful day.